Hello and welcome to this session today. We will just allow people to come into the webinar. I can see everybody joining steadily, so we'll give everybody just a moment to join us and then we'll begin our session today. I can see more people joining still, so we will carry on letting people enter. We'll start in a moment. Hello and welcome. It's a popular webinar today. I can still see the numbers coming up, so not everybody's quite in. Give it a few more seconds and we will kick off. Well, hello and welcome to this ETOA Insight session today on the state of play of European tourism. My name's Rachel Reid. I'm the Director of Insight here at ETOA. We're going to have a look at the latest stats and other data on trends and forecasts for European tourism. I'm delighted to be joined today by Juan Gómez of ForwardKeys. Lovely to have you back on one of our webinars again, Juan.
Thank you, Rachel. The pleasure is mine.
Thank you. And also Tim Schofield of Tripadvisor. So the sharp-eyed amongst you will notice it's not Justin Reid, if you were expecting Justin Reid as advertised. Unfortunately, he's been called away and he has sent Tim along as his most able substitute. So we welcome you for your first webinar with ETOA, Tim.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Good to be here.
Very much looking forward to hearing from you. In a moment, I'm going to hand over to Juan to kick things off. But before I do that, please do feel free to ask any questions you may have using the Q&A facility. And we'll try and cover some of those after we've heard from both Juan and Tim. We will send out the presentation afterwards, so no need to take furious notes of the screens. So with that, Juan, let's move over to you for the state of play of European tourism, please.
Thank you, Rachel, and good morning, everyone. Greetings from sunny Valencia in Spain. My name, of course, is Juan Gómez, and I am Head of Market Intelligence at ForwardKeys, knowledge partners of ETOA. It is always a pleasure to join these virtual meetings, and in this short presentation, I will review the outlook for the European tourism industry, the upcoming Easter season, as well as the summer, tapping into the key trends shaping recovery and the threats to this recovery. But before I start bombarding you with numbers and stats, please allow me some words about ForwardKeys, the data we use and the data that you will see displayed in your screens in a moment. At ForwardKeys, we're able to track changes in the travel industry in near real time. ForwardKeys data pinpoints every step of the traveler's journey. This starts with people planning their trips on meta search engines like Skyscanner, Kayak, Kiwi.com, you name it. And it continues with people booking a trip. Thanks to our collaboration with all key GDSs worldwide, including TravelSky for the Chinese market, we're able to know who will be flying where and when. We know when will they depart, what itinerary they'll take, how long they will stay, etc. And we build additional layers of intelligence on top of these enormous data sets to fill in the gaps and enrich the data. And one of them is called total air markets, in which we will try to make up for the lacks of data in some cases. On the supply side, we are also able to know which airlines will be flying where, when, with how many seats, what kind of aircrafts, and plenty of details, which I will skip for now, but that you can always ask me afterwards. Now that you're a bit more familiar with the data, let's see how we can use it to better understand what's the status of the European travel sector and where it is going. I'll start with a quick global overview. In 2022, as all of you know, global recovery stayed uneven, with no global region posting growth on pre-pandemic international arrival levels. The Middle East was the most recovered region, helped by international events such as the FIFA World Cup celebrated in Qatar at the end of the year, and which did not only benefit Qatar, but also help neighboring destinations attract visitors. The Middle East was followed closely by the Americas, with many Caribbean and Central American destinations posting growth on 2019 levels, followed then by Africa, Europe, and last, of course, the Asia and Pacific region. Now, looking at tickets confirmed for international arrivals during the first half of the year, globally, we expect a substantial rebound in international arrival levels, which will be around 70% of 2019 volumes. The Middle East has continued reaping the benefits of being in the spotlight with events such as the FIFA World Cup last year, and it will become the first global region to post overall growth on pre-pandemic international arrival levels. Europe, on the other hand, will reach approximately 80% of 2019 international arrival levels. Focusing on Europe and the performance of key segments or destination types, if you like, we observe that sun and beach destinations in Europe will continue to dominate, just as they did in 2022, recovering almost to pre-pandemic arrival levels. In the case of sun and beach destinations, only 8% below 2019 levels, followed, of course, by nature. And quite surprisingly, we see how shopping and to a lesser extent, urban and business destinations have also started picking up in this first half of the year. But let's put some names to this. Here's the list of top performing destinations during the first half of 2023 in Europe. And this list not only reveals, as I was saying, a strong interest for sun, beach and nature destinations, but also for unspoiled and off the beaten track destinations. Albania comes first, top performing destination with 10% more international arrivals than in the same period in 2019, and joined in this top 10 performing destination list by other neighboring destinations such as Slovenia or Bosnia and Herzegovina. So watch out for these upcoming destinations, as I say, off the beaten track and not the usual biggies such as Greece or Spain. And what is shaping this recovery? What are the trends that we're currently observing in the European travel and tourism landscape? First, the resilience of the premium segment, so premium travel, which continues to drive performance. Premium cabin class arrivals to Europe in the first half of the year are 4% above pre-pandemic levels, whilst arrivals in economy class are still around 20% behind pre-pandemic levels. This constitutes a great opportunity for businesses to increase its revenue with not necessarily more tourists, which is something that, of course, is again on the table. The issues of over-tourism that we've been talking for many years now. Secondly, long-haul markets, particularly American and Latin American ones that are setting their eyes on Europe and European destinations, and some are even experiencing a strong growth versus pre-pandemic. That is the case of Mexico, the USA, and Colombia. And this is yet another trend which we believe has the potential to help or cover for the absence of other key markets that haven't recovered just yet. And let me focus now on the US markets, which I believe exemplifies like none the new trends and traveler profiles that we're seeing now in the post-pandemic and especially into 2023. When looking at the characteristics of the US travelers, we see a strong 22% growth on arrivals to Europe in premium cabin class travel, longer stays, and an increase in small and family-sized groups. What we're also seeing from the US traveler is the change in destination preference, if you like, shifting towards Europe and leaving the Caribbean somehow behind. Of course, the Caribbean remains a really interesting destination as a whole, a region for US visitors. But what we're seeing is that whilst the Caribbean is growing more than Europe as a whole on average versus pre-pandemic, when we look at how Southern European destinations are doing, we uncover really a strong growth. This increase of US arrivals to Southern Europe is being driven by Portugal, Turkey, and Greece with 91%, 71%, and 54% increases versus 2019 in the first half of the year. And this is all being powered as well by an enormous increase in air supply. Multi-destination trips are also a thing with US visitors when they come to Europe, and we've uncovered some interesting country pairs as well. Greece and Italy, Portugal and France, Denmark and Norway, all growing strongly, even doubling the number of US visitors this year, at least in the first half of the year. And I don't want to finish this section without saying a few words, of course, about the Chinese traveler, which has also changed during the course of the pandemic. As I was saying, we're able to track Chinese travelers. They've traveled extensively across China during these years of lockdown, or at least not being able to fly abroad. And what we've now discovered when we are seeing them booking trips to Europe is that Chinese travelers are now more inclined as well on premium services and unique experiences, and are also more attracted to the idea of traveling by themselves, organizing their trips by themselves, rather than in organized tours that, as you know, are coming back slowly, being decided by the Chinese government, who are the countries that are open now for group travel. Unfortunately, not everything is positive, and there are, of course, some disruptive forces out there we should all watch out for. First, the industry's inability to cope with demand has so far been the biggest disruptor in the recovery, much more so than economic factors such as inflation. Here you see a correlation between inflation in the Eurozone and book tickets for travel in the Eurozone, and guess where the biggest dip is observed. Indeed, the weeks over the summer last year, in which we saw a scene, you will all remember, of chaos in airports across Europe, but particularly so in the UK, the Netherlands, and Germany. So being prepared to accommodate demand in many cases which in many cases will exceed 2019 levels, is key. Also, turning our eyes to current social unrest in France, we see how bookings for stays in Paris, but also for transfers in Paris, have gone from almost growing versus 2019 to being half of pre-pandemic levels in the course of the past month. Continued strikes and industrial action are, of course, as I'm saying, not only having a dent on tickets for arrivals to Paris, but also for transfers at Paris Charles de Gaulle, in this case being displayed in the screen. So being ready to accommodate demand, as I was saying, is one thing, but communication and crisis management remains key, particularly in times of crisis, as we saw during the pandemic. And here's another case, we now turn to Turkey, where you can see the evolution of tickets for traveling to and through Istanbul in the last few months, whilst bookings for transferring in Istanbul have recovered after the small dip after the earthquake. The city as a destination hasn't managed to recover the booking levels it had before the deadly earthquake in the south of Turkey, even though it is hundreds of miles away. So again, communication by destination, but not only by the public sector, but also from the private sector, is key in order to maintain a sustained recovery. Last, of course, the consequences of the war. Now that China has reopened and we expect an overall rebound of travel in Asia Pacific, as you were seeing in previous slides, recovering half of 2019 arrival levels, the inability of European carriers to fly over Russia is making things really difficult for this recovery. On average, flights from Asia Pacific to the EU of over 8 hours have increased its share by 14%, and long flights that require more fuel have also pushed fares up by 20% if we compare in the same moment in 2019. Right, to finish off, I know that we don't have all the time in the world today. To finish off, I'd like to give you some positive outlook for both Easter and summer. I'll start with Easter, which is fast approaching. Intra-European Air Supply will reach pre-pandemic levels finally this Easter, with many destinations like Turkey or Portugal growing on pre-pandemic levels. Looking at tickets confirmed for intra-European travel this Easter, this will be around 15% behind of 2019 levels. Still, remember, as I was saying earlier as well, the importance of long-haul markets, but thankfully we see a strong rebound in some markets, in particular, for example, the British market up by 12% on 2019 levels. The summer is also looking rather positive, so let's look at it quickly. Beach and nature destinations will continue to dominate yet again. Greece is set to be the top performing country, currently 17% above pre-pandemic levels, but when we look at the top growing destination cities. We also see some Italian, French, and Spanish destination topping the list of most resilient cities. So it's not all about beach resorts and nature. We also see cities coming up there. When looking at the UK as a source market, as I was saying, very strong for Easter, but also quite strong for the summer. Tickets for traveling to Europe are currently 8% above pre-pandemic levels overall, with strong increases for Greece, Turkey, Denmark, Sweden, and Cyprus. So as I was saying, a mix of that beach and nature component. But when we look at the top most resilient cities for UK tourists, what we see is that Paris comes first, and that is if social unrest and strikes allow for travelers to really trust on holidaying in the French capital this summer. Just to finish off, some key takeaways, as I was saying, sun and beach and nature destinations will continue to outperform the rest, but urban destinations and shopping are quickly catching up. Take advantage of the strength of the premium market, which will continue to outperform the budget segment and will be the main recovery driver in this year, or at least this first half of the year. Again, the industry's inability to accommodate demand, and that goes from transport to also tour operators, will hamper recovery over economic uncertainties, and communication and crisis management remains key. Last but not least, keep an eye on rising American markets while the Asia-Pacific region is still on recovery mode. I hope you found interesting these insights. As Rachel was saying, you can ask questions in the Q&A section, but as always, please do not hesitate to reach out afterwards if you'd like to know more about your destinations or market of interest, connecting me via LinkedIn or via email at juan.gomez at forwardkeys.com, or following ForwardKeys social media channels for more insights. I believe we will also have some time to answer these questions at the end of the webinar. So Rachel, the floor is yours again.
Oh, thank you so much, Juan, for another information-packed presentation and a whistle through thousands of details. Really encouraging that we can actually start talking about we are recovering, not when are we going to recover. I think that's a really refreshing thing to be doing in 2023. So I'm really pleased that your data backs that up. We're going to move over to Tim Schofield now of Tripadvisor, and really fortunate to be able to have Tripadvisor along and give us the online perspective, which I think is obviously more and more important year on year. So thank you so much for joining us, Tim. So I will hand over to you and you can share your perspectives.
Fantastic. Thanks, Rachel. Thanks for that, Juan, as well. That was really, really insightful. Fantastic presentation. Thank you very much for having me along. As Rachel mentioned, I work with Tripadvisor, and we're going to be bringing you some information looking at the economic portrait of the traveller today. So essentially, we ran a survey to give an overview of how our audience was engaging with travel trends for 2023, and how the financial situation across the globe has sort of impacted those travel planning decisions. Excuse me. A little bit of background on me, just quickly. So I've been working with Tripadvisor for around 10 years now, and I work exclusively with tourism boards. So I'm responsible for sort of facilitating routes to market for different tourism boards across the globe, and utilizing Tripadvisor's sort of data and research pool to try and help to educate and to give a better understanding of how destinations can benefit from our platform. So I'll kick things off with a quick overview of Tripadvisor. If you're not familiar with the platform, we're one of the world's largest travel platforms, around 436 million users on a monthly basis. We operate in around 28 languages, 190 countries. And I think the final stat on this slide is important. About 60% of anybody that books travel online globally comes to Tripadvisor prior to their purchase. So that gives us a great ability to have insight and understanding on the behavior of the travelers, and the data that we're able to gather gives us a great level of understanding there as well. We're actively, obviously, in search of reviews from travelers to give other travelers a better understanding of how they can plan and have their perfect trip. And we reached the milestone of around 1 billion reviews last year. So obviously that's still growing, but fantastic effort for us. We've been around 20 years now in the market. So a quick overview on the actual study that we're going to be taking a deep dive into today. So we work with our partner Qualtrics to analyze around 5,000 responses from global users. So we looked at Australia, India, Japan, Singapore, the US, and the UK. And the survey was fielded in September of 2022. The idea was to give an economic portrait of travel trends moving into 2023. So lots of the points that Juan touched on, you know, the outlook is bright, and as Rachel mentioned, it's not about when we're returning to travel, it's about how travel's growing now. So we know that 93% of all respondents, they plan to travel over the next 12 months, and 86% of those respondents are planning to travel for leisure purposes, 27% also for business, but only 7% of users are not currently planning to travel. And looking at the specific countries, how that travel trend or desire ranks against 2019 levels, we can see that we're around about the same level as we were in 2019. There's a couple of markets there that rank slightly higher, one slightly lower, but overall, we're looking like, you know, we're back to that travel trend for 2019, and if not, you know, growing above. And importantly, 55% of respondents, they're planning 3 or more trips in 2023. So you can see they're ranking from 1 trip, 2 trips, 3 trips, 4 trips, or 5 trips. The larger scale, 55% of respondents are all planning 3 or more trips. And they're looking to travel for longer as well. So anything indexing in the light green color there is the intent trip for the next 12 months. So users are overall planning to travel longer than they were in 2019. So relax and rejuvenation is the key that we're seeing from this survey. 36% of users want to relax and rejuvenate, 35% want to make memories. It's all about sort of experiencing those relaxing travel journeys and making memories with families and friends. Coming down into the data a bit deeper now, we can see that travel is not a negotiable expense. So when we asked our users how did they see their mandatory and discretionary spending, around 61% of the household spends mandatory, meaning, you know, it's household bills, mortgages, groceries, things like that, and 39% is discretionary spending. So we dug a little deeper into that 39%, into the discretionary spending, to find out how that ranked across different sectors. So leisure travel accounts for the largest share of annual discretionary budget at 19%. Restaurants and bars and eating out also 19%, shopping 18%. But people are counting on their discretionary spend to make sure they're experiencing and enjoying travel. And in terms of concern around the cost of living crisis, most users, you know, 60% of users there are concerned about what's happening, but I think that ranks higher as you move through the age groups. So around 29% of 55-year-olds and above were concerned about the economic impact of the global crisis, whereas this obviously index is lower for users in the 18 to 24 age range. But despite global concerns about rising costs, 78% of respondents are planning to spend more, or at least the same time, on travel as they were last year. So versus the previous 12 months, users are much more likely to be spending, 78%, sorry, of respondents plan to spend more or at least the same time on travel as they did last year. So only 1 in 5 are going to be spending less time on travel than they did last year. 95% of respondents would decrease spend in other categories to save for the next vacation. So travel obviously is key. Users are prioritizing travel, and they're ensuring that that element of their budget is something that they don't want to negotiate on. The impact of pent-up demand continues to fuel that willingness in spend. So we did see a drop-off in travel, obviously, across the pandemic, and we've seen the return in 2022, and we're seeing that pent-up demand continue to drive through 2023. So eagerness to travel post-COVID is the highest ranking response across all markets in their willingness to travel in 2023. So you can see that people are keen to get back out there. They're keen to have those family holidays again that might have been on a hiatus for the last couple of years, and ensuring that they're getting back out and utilising their budgets to do so. So looking now at how travellers spend budget and their splurges. So those who are considering cutting spend but have not yet are also cutting other categories and prioritising travel. So only 11% of respondents said that they would cut their travel budget essentially to ensure that their overall budget could go further. Clothing, accessories and purchases was the largest sector that would essentially see a cut in spend. But you can see that domestic travel, international travel, and things like ride shares, taxis, they're going to be the elements that people are non-negotiable on, really. Only a small minority of people are looking to cut budget there. And nearly half of all travel budget covers the basics, so lodging and transportation. So if you can see the two green shaded areas, accommodation and F&B, ranking there around 49% of spend for a holiday, whereas 51% of all engagement in destination is going to be on things like entertainment activities, shopping, transportation, so forth. So people are keen to get back out there and spend their money on travel, but they're also keen to spend their money in destination as well. We see this vary year on year across the globe, but certainly in destination spending trends are looking strong at the moment. And travel is a treat worthy of a splurge. So Juan mentioned the premium travelers in a couple of his slides. You can see that 19%, at least 1 in 5 respondents are willing to spend higher costs on their travel experiences. So accommodation costs of $400 plus per night, $1,000 plus on airfare, 26% of respondents are willing to spend there. $151 plus per person on dining, 25% of respondents, and $201 plus per person on entertainment. It's 27% of the respondents. So people are willing to get out there and spend budget, and there's certainly a consideration for targeting those premium travelers. Eating local during travel is always key. So we have a large restaurant sector at Tripadvisor, and we like to kind of deep dive into how in-destination dining and how dining when traveling is going to impact people's decision making. So across all different age groups, there are some slight nuances, but older respondents tend to patronize fast food options less than the other groups. But you can see that local casual restaurants are the key ranking sector so the key ranking experience that people are going to be looking for in the restaurant sector. So just a quick summary, an overview of some of the key points of data. We're looking at a bright travel outlook for 2023. 9 in 10 respondents plan to travel in the next 12 months, building on the recovery that we saw in 2022. And they're planning to travel more. More than half will take 3 or more trips in the next 12 months. And travel is a non-negotiable expense. So it accounts for the largest share of discretionary budget. Inflation and rising costs have impacted travelers' decisions, but 78% still plan to spend more or the same as this time last year. 95% of users would rather scale back other purchases in order to maintain their travel. And those who made changes to discretionary spending have focused more on other elements rather than travel. So we saw 53% will cut back on clothing, but only 11% are going to make that cut back on travel. And the spending power extends across multiple categories and travel stages. So respondents are prepared to travel by purchasing from a wide range of categories, not just one-off purchases, but rather regular and in-travel behavior. 1 in 4 choose shopping as their #1 spend category when in destination. And more than 6 in 10 agree that shopping is an important category to allocate travel budget to. Only 4% typically shop during leisure trips. Don't typically shop during leisure trips. And those who travel more spend more. So we know that there is power in those people that are willing to travel. Frequent travelers are especially enthusiastic consumers. So booking accommodation at higher rates, booking higher rate dining experiences in destination attractions and airfares. And 53% of frequent travelers will spend more on travel in the next 12 months than they did in the past year. So that's compared to 38% of occasional travelers. I think the main points really here, travel is non-negotiable. Yes, the cost of living crisis is impacting decision making, but longer trips are better compared to 2019. So more people want to travel for longer, and people are looking for local experiences and local things to do. So that kind of covers things off for me. Thank you very much. I'll stop sharing. And as Rachel mentioned, any questions there, just shoot them in the channel.
Thank you so much, Tim, for sharing such detail of your survey. How very illuminating. Just before we move to questions, may I say congratulations on your 1 billion reviews. That's a fantastic milestone. And actually, just before we move on to the broader questions, a question here for you, Tim. Is this a one-off piece of research, or is it something that you do every year?
This is the first time we've looked in a deep dive on how the economic picture is going to impact travel planning. But on an annual basis, we do commission a report that looks at the sort of value of the traveller, essentially. So I think this year was the first year we included the cost of living crisis and how that might be impacting travel decisions. But we do publish an annual report every year about the trends within spend in the travel sector. Yeah.
I feel an annual webinar coming on at ETOA in that case. But, thanks for that. So some questions are coming in, and as we say, do please type them in there. Just as those are coming, I think both of you obviously mentioned the bounce back and how encouraging that is to see. I think you mentioned, Juan, we've sort of stopped talking about over-tourism, or we did during the pandemic, but it's almost as if during the pandemic, we swapped the phrase over-tourism for pent-up demand. And I do wonder how long we'll see the effect of this pent-up demand, obviously, because that's been a fantastic way of driving recovery, but are we sort of on the cusp of that not being something that's a factor anymore? I just wonder if either of you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, Rachel, and I think it's good as well to sort of like put it into context with the issue of over tourism. We've been talking for quite a few months now about how, when this bubble of the pent-up demand will burst, or when it will sort of like fade into more sustainable levels. What we are seeing is that, as you know, Tim was also confirming that tourists are not being put off by the increase in prices, the really high inflation, also all the doom and gloom about the economy or the prospects of the economy even, and people keep on traveling. But of course, we need to be prepared for a change in this paradigm, which we don't know when it will happen. As I was saying, I mean, we look at tickets being booked for future arrivals, and what we're seeing is that there is a sustained growth, which in some cases, as I was saying, is reflecting on positive growth in comparison with 2019 numbers. Of course, on overall, we're not quite there yet. So we see growth in specific markets, in specific destinations, but not overall. So it's just a matter of wait and see, and of course, be prepared, be on top of ever-changing trends, and be prepared for, first of all, accommodate the demand that is currently out there, manage it in a way that is not making things difficult for your local businesses and stuff, and see how it works. But for now, I think it's very difficult to say when this will end. But of course, I'm of the personal view that it will certainly change. But now, as I say, once the conditions are right, we will also see this pent-up demand coming from China, which at the moment is not happening because of the various difficulties. One, the capacity is not there. Secondly, traveling between Europe and the Asia Pacific is still quite difficult due to the war. But we will see that. So maybe if some markets like the US market goes down, then we might be able to compensate with an increase in Chinese or rest of Asia. So we'll see.
Thanks, Juan. Tim, I don't know if you have a perspective on that one.
So I think aligned with Juan there. Really, I mean, it's hard to know. Certainly, the element is the growth in travel, right? So it's not necessarily pent-up demand. It's how travel is growing and where it's growing. We're constantly comparing to 2019 because that's our reference point for pre-pandemic action. But where was 2019 versus 2018, and how are things growing in that direction? So, and I think perhaps the pent-up demand. This is me speaking from personal experience, but I think perhaps the pent-up demand is possibly more relative for traditional destinations or more traditional offerings, whereas you're looking at the change in travel coming from the younger age groups and how fit travelers are making those decisions and the experiences they want to have, and how that might differ from a more sort of traditional travel picture. So I think there's a multitude of things that can impact. But really, what we're looking at here is the growth in travel and where that might be coming from. So if, as Juan says, the Chinese market starts to pick back up, then where are we seeing that, and is there the potential to capitalize there? Hopefully, geopolitical issues across the globe shift and change, and we're able to see more action there as well.
Well, may I say, Tim, what an amazingly convenient segue into another question that we had here. So while you're speaking, it may be something to talk about. Speaking about different types of travel, and you're talking about just actual growth in travel as we would have had we just continued without a pandemic. I have a question here from Carlos saying, what's your feeling on adventure travel as a growth market, and how it's comparing to other types of travel? So we'll stick with Tim as you're on the line, as it were, and then we'll come to you.
So the adventure travel sector is always indexing high for Tripadvisor's user base. So we've seen a shift into younger segments within the platform. I don't have any specific data to hand on it. Obviously, it varies by destination, but it's certainly what people are looking to get out and experience. So we do know that, within the younger age ranges, that's a key consideration. Culture and local experiences. We talked about that, sort of relax and rejuvenate and local experiences within the report that we shared just then. However, they do also rank higher. Adventure, I think destination dependent, obviously, is always a key consideration for our user base. But we can gladly share with Rachel any more insight that we have around that.
We always love additional insight, Tim. But Juan, I don't know if you have any comment on that sector.
Yeah, we mainly, as I was saying earlier, we mainly work with air travel data. But as I was pointing in some of my slides, we also track how nature destinations, which can also be a proxy for adventure travel, are performing, and indeed they are doing well, and we've seen it during the past couple of years that they've done extremely well, not only obviously for air arrivals in destinations which are closer to those nature or adventure destinations, but also people that decide to travel with their cars or camper vans or all sorts. What we're seeing, and I would like to link this with also what Tim was saying about the changes in traveler profile and traveler preferences, and how the different age segments also are kind of like bringing in new trends. And I think when we show in the list of top performing destinations or top growing destinations places like Albania, Slovenia or Bosnia, I think we are specifically talking about this, about discovering places which are I would say rather untouched if you compare with, you know, the usual destinations that, for example, a US visitor would normally think of visiting when coming to Europe. Is totally outside and quite far from, you know, the usual let's say route of or triangle of big cities such as London, Rome, Paris, Barcelona. Even now we see how, you know, these long haul markets are coming to Europe, all the way to Europe, to go to specific places and kind of like hidden places to discover what's you know, what hasn't been spoiled.
Indeed, and actually that sort of follows on to another point we've had from question we've had from Jan, and he's directed it to you, Tim, but I think it's actually a broader one anyway, around sustainability and ecological footprint, because I mean, you both shared the trend towards a longer trip, which is generally good, making more of the flight miles, as it were, and we've seen that as a trend, and obviously one of the things we spoke about during the pandemic was the opportunity to build back better, as it were. And the question from Jan is really, well, it was originally to Tim about, was there any indication on the survey about people thinking about carbon footprint when choosing their destinations and their discretionary spend? Is it something that you asked, or is that a different survey, or any insights on that?
Yeah, it is a different survey. We do have a survey that focuses in on now sort of sustainability elements and over tourism considerations and things like that. So it wasn't part of this survey, unfortunately. But again, we can share the data. It is certainly on the traveller's mind. It's something that comes up obviously in every sort of conference and talk that we do, whereas, you know, how actionable is that for the traveller, and how much are they making their booking decisions around those elements, and I think it's pretty easy to say that it definitely is. Users are more engaged with those topics now than they ever have been, and particularly as we see the shift in demographics across the travel landscape. Travel is open now to many younger people than it was certainly when I was, you know, 18 to 24, and those considerations are certainly higher on their agenda than they might be for the 55 plus. So yeah, we see it across demographics as well, ranking differently. But again, as I say, it's another study, but we can dig into that information for you. Absolutely.
Thanks, Tim. Juan, I don't know if you have any insight based on the air travel side. Does that influence how people have been booking their tickets?
We don't have any specific information on people's you know, feeling or thinking about, or for example, whether they will click on when booking a flight to pay extra. Although we're working on several metrics to of course measure sustainability, and particularly so environmental sustainability, because in terms of you know, the model sustainability, our data is you know, widely applied by our customers to improve or make more sustainable their models. As you know, Tim was also mentioning, and you, Rachel, we're still comparing with 2019 levels, and we see, you know, growth numbers as a positive thing, but we also need to put that in context and look back at how or where we were before the pandemic, and of course the issue of over tourism, and think and be clear that more is not always better. And you also mentioned, you know, we know that travelers are willing to stay longer, which is something that of course is positive. They're also willing to spend more, so we just need to, you know, play with that and try to, you know, to become more sustainable, not only environmentally but also in general, and try to, you know, attract new markets or upcoming markets to our lower seasons, etc., so that, you know, culturally, economically, we manage to build a sustainable model.
Yes, I mean, it's interesting. I think one difficulty that some of our listeners will encounter is that what people say is their intention in a survey isn't always matched on the ground when they're actually making a booking. So it can be difficult to know what to offer based on intention, because I think we've seen some surveys, I think it was from the US, where they would only be willing to pay $30 more for a sustainable option. So it's very tricky sometimes with regards to planning on that front. Probably something we'll have to see as a trailblazing trend and follow a trend once something happens that way. But interesting from both of you. We're near the end of our time, but I do have a question here from Idris. Obviously, we've spoken about Juan, you showed the impact of the earthquake, and you spoke about the airstrikes in France and security issues at the airports. And one thing we haven't touched on recently is the Baltic states and the situation in Ukraine. Obviously, we saw when it was a younger situation, as it were, people had initially avoided, but then had sort of come out of that and were willing to visit Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, if it didn't involve the flying over the Russian airspace. I just wonder whether there was any updates on attitude or intention on the Baltic states.
Yeah, I didn't focus on that specific side because I was putting the spotlight on the destinations that were growing the most. Indeed, the Baltics are not the destinations that are on top of the growing charts. What we see, and people attending the webinar, which will also receive the copy of the presentation later, will be able to see the map, the Europe map, and we'll see that those destinations in general, Central, Eastern European destinations are closer geographically to the conflict, are of course performing below the average. For the Baltics, we're expecting them to be around 20–30% below pre-pandemic levels. Of course, it varies in depending the markets that we look into. But yeah, indeed, they're doing much worse than the rest of Europe, or at least than the average. And that's of course linked to the close proximity to the conflict. And again, tapping into or going back into the previous questions that we were discussing, the Baltics were in the perfect place to become these new destinations that are unspoiled, that have a lot to offer in terms of nature, in terms of culture, and also the capacity, or at least the air travel capacity, was being enhanced by carriers like Air Baltic. So we hope, of course, like everyone, that the situation goes back to normal, and that peace comes back, and hopefully we see these destinations coming up again.
Indeed. Tim, I don't know if you have people discussing the Baltics with information you can access.
No, we can definitely access it more granular information. I'm speaking from guesswork a little bit, but yeah, I would imagine, similar to what Juan says, we're seeing engagement drop as a result of the conflict that's happening in the region. Again, comparing to 2019, there's multiple factors that are going to impact that drop, but I would anticipate that obviously the conflict in the region is there. And similarly, to reiterate Juan's point, the position and the potential for those destinations is great. So yeah, we're all hoping for a swift resolution.
Indeed, absolutely. So we'll just about wrap up. We can perhaps actually finish on this question from Brian, which probably is a good one to close our thoughts on. And he was wondering, what are the expectations for the summer regarding the operational issues you mentioned, Juan, thinking about the UK, the Netherlands, Germany, etc. Do we have any insights on how people are feeling about that in terms of how it would affect their travel plans? Has it put them off booking, etc.?
Well, bookings and are showing, as I showed earlier, how sensitive are travelers to any changes, any political movements, any social unrest. We've seen declines for France. We've seen declines as well for Israel. Now with the protests in Tel Aviv, we see how Turkey has an earthquake, and if it's not well communicated, Istanbul, which is hundreds of miles away and thankfully not affected by the earthquake, is indeed affected by a decline in travel intent. So we certainly see, the potential risk of the demand being hampered by any issues that the industry has accommodating this demand. So again, and you allow me to do this sort of like infomercial thing. We work with data, with near real-time data, and last summer we knew that the demand for traveling out from some key European hubs was close to pre-pandemic levels, if not higher. And the data is there, and the data is pointing us to the right direction. So it's just a matter of using that data in our daily decisions and base our decisions in data and be prepared, get prepared with whatever experts are telling us. I mean, we have, of course, team from Tripadvisor, us, but there's other many providers out there, and we need to rely on that and get prepared.
Indeed. Thank you, Juan. Tim, coming to you for final thoughts on the summer, etc.
Yeah, I think as Juan mentioned, people are respondent to changes, and then that can always shift. The sentiment as it stands is certainly up. We see booking numbers up. Juan shared a lot of that data in what they're focusing on as well. So the demand is there, and people are making those considered purchases. They are making them with a longer lead time than they did previously as well. So travel windows are extending. People are making those booking and planning decisions earlier. Possibly the cost of living is having an impact on that. So they're prioritizing their spend and ensuring that they're ready to go with their budgets. But the demand is there for the summer for sure. But yeah, we'll caveat that. Like Juan said, people are quick to respond and react if they need to.
Indeed. Well, I think that's just about all we've got time for. There are a couple more specific questions in here that we haven't got to that we can cover off afterwards offline. If you are interested in data and statistics, do take a look at our Insight Hub, etoa.org/insight. You can find an awful lot more on there, including more things from ForwardKeys. We've made you a separate section now, Juan, for people to find your stuff. And it sounds like we can put some things up from Tripadvisor as well. So do take a look at that, etoa.org/insight, if you want to have some more stats and reports. So it remains for me to thank Juan Gómez and Tim Schofield for joining us today. We hope to see you again soon, and to wish you all a very pleasant day. Goodbye.
Goodbye, and thank you, Rachel. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Rachel. Goodbye all. Cheers.
Right.